Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 5:30 on a Monday morning. We are recording. 5:30 in the morning is when we pull a toy from the toy box, a random object from the Random Object Randomogrifier. I'm just going to spritz these watercolors real quick, make sure they're nice and juicy for later on. We want them moist. We don't want to have to scrub them to get them to work. Juicy, moist. Anyway, this is when we pull a random object from the Random Object Randomogrifier and we draw it and we talk about it. And this morning's random object from the Random Object Randomogrifier. Say that 5 times fast. That. This morning's random object is a seahorse. Seahorses are one of those things that have always fascinated people. They're beautiful. They're still and quiet. And it's hard to imagine that they're actually alive. We see them and they just look so mysterious to us. And there's lots of them. There's lots of different kinds. I think I can't remember if there were 28 different species or 46 different species, but there's lots of diversity within those species because you have sea dragons, you have things that look like big, fiery, leafy dragon type things. I don't know which way would be better for the book. I think we're going to do the book this way. But you have the big, fiery dragon looking things. You have the long, skinny, just a piece of fluff hanging from a branch kind of things. And then you have the big, beautiful spiny, just like this one, like this specimen here. Just hard to believe it's alive. Hard to believe that it could actually do anything. They're related to tuna and mackerel. Around 60 million years ago, tuna and mackerel and their cousins decided to separate. You had just to fill some different niches. The ancestor to tuna and mackerel, not specifically tuna and mackerel, the ancestor to tuna and mackerel, and the ancestor to what would become our what are these things? Horsefish, seahorse. The ancestor to what would eventually become our seahorse niched apart. One went to the open ocean and became super speedy fast. One went to the marshes and gave up all useful motility. And what I mean by that is these things can't really swim away. They have this one little fin on the back. They have this one little fin on the back that they ungulate. And that's what propels them. And then they usually have a little bitty fin on either side that is not represented on this toy. They usually have one little fin on either side that they use for steering. They up and down, turning left or right. They use that for steering. And this little thing just, they're super slow, super goofy with the way they try to get around. Anyway, they deviated from the same family that produced the tuna and mackerels about 65 million years ago, and then seahorses specifically start showing up around 20 million years ago. The rest of the family are called pipefish. And a seahorse is really just a modified pipefish. And that just means, just like it sounds, they're just long, skinny, long skinny fish with bony plates. The seahorse have their bones are fused into bony plates that make little ringlets around their body. They don't have a rib cage like you think of, where it expands and contracts. They don't have the scales like other fish have. They have these bony plates that are fused into rings around their body, and then they have a real thin layer of skin over the top of that. And that makes them, it further decreases their motility. I don't think I'm going to attempt to draw every one of these knobs. I think I'm just going to indicate that these knobs are there. But I bet if I put enough of them in, it'll be understood that these knobs, what these knobs are going around this thing. The most famous fact about seahorses at all is that the males carry the young. The males have a pouch, and the females come up and deposit their eggs into the pouch. And that is how we know the males are not very good swimmers. No, I mean, that is how they reproduce. The males then carry the eggs in their pouch until it's time to hatch, and the eggs hatch and swim out of the pouch, and there's another brood of seahorses. But I bet if they were better swimmers, you wouldn't see nearly as much of that. All right, and then we have some ribs coming off around here. But again, they're not ribs, they're just ridges. I want to draw, because I know it should be there, I want to draw the little directional fin. But it's not there, and I have to remember it's a toy. I have to remember that it is not a seahorse. It is a toy. They don't have jaws per se. They have long suction tube mouths, and they just suck food out of the water. As the food swims by, the little zooplankton swim by, the seahorses just suck it out of the water. All right, I think that's enough to get us a what's going on with my chat? Something's happened to my chat. There we go. They just float along. My mom says they just float along and seem mysterious and majestic at the same time. You know, one of my first memories of seahorses, and this is dumb, because one of my first memories of seahorses is not of a seahorse itself. My first memory of a seahorse is at Frontier City. It's either Frontier City or Spring Lake. Honestly, I can't tell you which. But they had a live action show that was supposed to be underwater. It had blue lights, and it had big balls and bubbles, and it had mermaids. It had a lady dressed up as a mermaid, and they came out riding a seahorse and playing the song "I'm a Rhinestone," like a rhinestone cowboy, which was a very popular song at the time. I sound like the grandfather on The Simpsons, which was the style at the time. But I remember that vividly, And every time I think about seahorses, that is something I think about, is that scene where the cowboy came out dressed up in a spangly outfit with the mermaid floating around him, because you know they're on a stage. They're not even on strings. They don't have that kind of budget. But the mermaid floating around him and playing that song, like a ransom cowboy. And everything about that was absolutely wrong. from the idea that the seahorse could be saddled and could be fast and could keep up. But it was entertaining, and I remember it very well. And I couldn't have been, I couldn't have been 7 or 8. I had to be little. Especially if it was Spring Lake, because Spring Lake shut down when I was very young. Spring Lake was a what do you call it? Amusement park in Oklahoma City. Long before there was a frontier city, there was a Spring Lake. Anyway, that's my first memory of seahorses, and it's completely wrong. It kind of set the mood of what I would think about seahorses every time I saw them in the future, and it was completely wrong. But it's a fun memory. Their scientific name is hippocampus. When I read that, I was like, wait a minute, hippocampus is the name of the part of the brain that does the lizard thinking. And it turns out that's because when the anatomists started dissecting the human brain and they saw this little curlicue feature, they said, hey, that looks like a seahorse, and named it the hippocampus. So part of your brain's named after the seahorse. I thought that was a pretty neat fact. Mom says Spring Lake was a very popular place to go. But these things, they just anchor themselves on the grass with this little prehensile tail. They just anchor themselves in and wait for the food to float by. I kind of do that too. I just kind of sit at my chair and hope food lands by me. It never works out for me, though. Bad swimmers. They're really bad swimmers. They're popular with aquarists because of how strange and beautiful they are. But they're like most other strange and beautiful sea life. They are difficult to keep. Mostly because they are so bad of swimmers. They don't compete well for food. So if you have anything else in the aquarium, they'll starve to death. You have to keep enough zooplankton in there to have it floating by them at a pretty constant rate. Because all they can do is just sit there and they just kind of sit there and and do this, just and wait for stuff to float by. So, subtle hint. You have to make sure that you have enough zooplankton in your aquarium, and you've got to keep the zooplankton alive, and that's not easy to do. Do. Humans. My mom is asking me if they have natural enemies. They're not. Their adaptations for camouflage are very effective. They're not the tasty. They're not the tasty treat of choice of just about anything. But humans actually are their biggest threat because we keep going out into the wilderness and capturing them and taking them back to put into our aquariums, and they don't survive that. When they're caught in the wild, they don't survive that. But as far as I know, I mean, obviously, obviously, if something finds them, it will snack on them. But their camouflage is such that they just look like little crunchy things, and they're just not they're not sought after for food. So there's no mention of major predation. The major predation is humans taking them home to put in their aquariums. So their biggest threat, they're not endangered. As far as anybody can tell, they're not endangered. Their biggest threat is habitat loss and overzealous fishing for the aquarium trade. And then one of the things that peeves me the most about humans is they have a huge market in the alternative medicine trade, traditional medicine trade. And that just peeves me to no end because there's no evidence that works. It's just a persistent belief that somebody said, hey, this exotic creature can help you with your impotency. This exotic creature can help you with your attractiveness to the opposite sex. This exotic creature can help you get the girls. And so people have been catching and drying and grinding these things up for centuries for no flipping reason. Because even if it did have any effect whatsoever on virility, it's not going to make you more attractive to the girls. I don't care how many of these things you crush up and eat. It's not going to make the girls like you more. It's not going to solve your actual problem of not being attractive. And if you are the kind of person who catches small animals and grinds them up so that you can be more attractive to the opposite sex, then you have bigger problems than infertility, than erectile dysfunction. My friend Claudia could sell you something that would actually work. You don't have to go around killing seahorses for it. There is an effort, though, to educate the public out of that mindset going on in the Philippines and Vietnam. and Indonesia. They're trying to educate people into understanding that these animals are for looking and not for touching, not for grinding up and selling. The other problem is that people like them as souvenirs. And so they dry them up and hang them on the wall for decoration. So that's an issue. Right, just like the blue tangs. It's just like the blue tangs. It's the same group. Mom's in the chat room. Of course we do, just like the blue tangs. It's the same, and it's the same groups that are trying to at least regulate the the overfishing. Let me dry this real quick. If I don't dry it, I do get stuck. Yeah, it is just like the blue tangs. How are we doing on time? Oh, it's 5:52. We got to get a move on. It is just like the blue tangs, where people think they're pretty and they say, "Oh, I've got to have one of these in my aquarium." They don't know anything about keeping them alive. They don't know anything about what they eat. There are classes. The aquarists have hobby classes now that teach them how to at least keep them alive. The Indonesians, the Vietnamese, the Philippines have groups out training people how to harvest the animals for the trade. They're not trying to make the people. There are people whose livelihoods depend on catching these things, feeding their family. Same with the blue tangs. There's people whose whole families depend on their ability to sell to the aquarium trade, to the tourism trade. And if they can't do it, they're going to starve to death. That is a valid argument. Their family has been doing it for centuries. It's the only trade they know, and if they don't do that, their family's going to starve to death. And so that is a valid argument when you consider how to go forward and protect the animal, but still make sure that the people have what they need to provide for their families. And there are whole groups of people out there that say, well, they can learn to code. Well, it's just not always an option. Sometimes you just have to work within the frame that you have. And so they're teaching them to farm them in such ways so that there'll be some left. They're not over harvesting. They're managing what they take. They're rotating out the beds that they're hunting in, or that they're gathering in, so that the populations can regroup. At least with this species, with these animals, they're not killing everything around it with cyanide, like they were doing with the blue tangs. At least they're not doing that. So there's progress there. Can't talk. Harding. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. And it again, you know, kudos to the they clean. My mom wants to know what their contribution to the ecosystem is. They keep the phytoplankton under control. They keep the phytoplankton from destroying the marshes and the reefs. They control the population of the small animals that float by. Otherwise, the marshes would be overpopulated and become murky, and the light wouldn't get down to the bottoms where other organisms depend on that light to survive. That's a good question, Mom. She's in my ear. I know you can't, you guys didn't hear the question, but she asked the question in the ear what their contribution is to the ecosystem, and that is their contribution to the ecosystem is that they help filter the phytoplankton out of the water, and in doing so, they make it so that the light reaches the bottom. Do do do. Let's see. Did we talk about everything? They have, like I said, they have aquarium programs. They have a very strong captive breeding program. So aquarists don't have to buy wild caught like they do the blue tangs. So there's at least there's that. And the I I was asking all kinds of questions about like, well, why can't we do like with the rhinos? You know, the rhinoceros were suffering the same problem because people thought the rhino horns gave them virility, and so they were killing off the rhinos. And the poachers were killing off all the rhinos just for the horns, and the they came up with a way to 3D print rhino horns that are indistinguishable from real rhino horns, from natural rhino horns. And in so doing, they took the money out of the game. So the rhino horn market dried up. And I wonder if they couldn't do the same thing with seahorses, at least in the tourism trade where people want to buy the dried up seahorses to put on the wall. And there is some success there. They are doing a lot more 3D printing of seahorses instead of catching and drying live seahorses. They're doing more 3D printing and making toys of seahorses. So there is some progress in that area. But in the traditional medicine arena, the anything but live caught is not considered effective, if you will, even though there is no proven effectiveness of what they're doing. They just believe that if it's not live caught, it won't be effective. But they're not actually concerned about effectiveness, or they'd be comparing whether or not what they're currently doing is effective. But I don't want to harp too much about how bad traditional medicine is, because there's lots of things that are in traditional medicine that we poo-poo because the AMA doesn't want us going that route. They want us using their medicines, even though the traditional medicine may also be successful. So I don't want to go too far in saying that it's absolutely not successful, but I will tell you, if you're killing a seahorse so that you can be more attractive to the ladies, you're doing it wrong. Okay, so there is my version of the seahorse from the model. And then let's see if we can figure out how to get all this stuff turned off. Ejected, safely eject, get this camera down. Can't imagine some girl going, "Oh, you're so pretty the way you killed that seahorse." I just can't see that ever being a way to attract the ladies. All right. So there it is from my perspective. So that is what I did this morning. My little girl is on vacation, so she did not pull an egg for me. I had to pull an egg all by myself. Let's see what we have. It is a penguin. What kind of penguin is it? This is an umbo penguin. I'm throwing it back. This is from SeaWorld. This is a South African. It just says it can't be South African. Sure enough, South African penguin. So this is what we're going to do tomorrow, Tuesday, July 22nd. It says South African. I may have to look closer. I may not. I may need to take a picture of the image, take the picture of the label and blow it up so that I can see what I'm talking about. But if you're watching this on Tuesday the 22nd and it's before 5:30 in the morning, then you're watching the trailer and we're about to do this. So stick around. We'll get started on it. But for those of us on the Monday side of things, I have to get ready for work. And I appreciate everybody coming out this morning. I look forward to doing this every day when I get to come down here and art with my besties and talk about cool sciencey stuff, especially cool sciencey stuff. I like this. My favorite part of the day. It keeps me accountable to my art practice, and it lets us get together and have a good time. So be sure and tune in tomorrow, same Artistic Biker time, same Artistic Biker channel. And we dance. We dance until somebody says they see me dancing, because that means that the lag has caught up with the stream. And once the lag catches up with the stream, then I know